Now we study the fifth section, which is about sociology and common sense knowledge. Now, much of this has been explained earlier about how common sense knowledge is based on an arbitrary understanding and therefore does not represent actuality. But let's look at it more carefully. Now, often, if one examines the constituents of common sense knowledge, there are two approaches that emerge. One is a sort of naturalistic explanation, which means that nature as a kind of argument is used to not explain behavior but explain away behavior. So, nature assumes that there is a certain way things are, that by a divine force, and with often deterministic connotations, things just are the way they are. So trees grow, we don't know why, but they do. What we know is that they do. So, what we know is that they do. So, these are naturalistic explanations. And then there are individualistic explanations, which are based on an individual case and generalized across the spectrum. So, an example of this would be if one looks at poverty as an object of study, then a naturalistic explanation that's often encountered is that people are poor because they're afraid to work. They can't budget properly, so they don't know where to spend. They don't know how to spend on the right things to be able to prosper. They're not smart enough, and they're not critical enough. They don't care enough. That's why they're poor. Sociological understanding, which is based on an examination of the average case and on the relationships on a sustained um, uh, revelation that that emerges when study takes place of poverty and all of the people who interact with the idea of poverty, reveals that modern society is a class-based society. So social organization is based on economic value, and this overwhelms all activity and the way people consider themselves. And all of this, and this leads to chronic irregularity of work for some people and low wages for some people. This class structure that that becomes the uh, that becomes the basis of formation of society, and that would be the sociological explanation. Therefore, we aren't attributing it to any arbitrary factor. Like, this is based on studies, based on questioning. So, there are many such meaningful and unsuspected connections that are revealed when one goes through masses of connections. So, obviously, sociology studies the masses, like the common experiences of people, the extraordinary experiences of people, but also very much the ordinary experiences of people. So, that does not mean that it comes up with the ordinary explanations that are usually prevalent. What that means is that from these ordinary understandings, a meaningful but unsuspected connection reveals itself, and um, sociology is so important and different from common sense, because this isn't this isn't ordinarily expected, and that does not mean there has to be an attempt to be different, as much as that people's own biases are in their interest. So therefore, that needs to be challenged, and this is why advances in sociological knowledge are made incrementally. So, a, like small, meaningful connections accumulate to form a different discovery of reality, and that's of course very important. But um usually these changes occur incrementally. So, sociology has its own body of concepts and data, and it's not unreflective like common sense, because it is based in the method of questioning. It is based in the method of being as representative as possible, subject to scrutiny of the kinds of methods employed, and subject to rechecking by whoever wishes to, and often many do. So it's a systematic and questioning approach, and it's the tradition of scientific investigation where um, causal explanations are often sought, and there is, like the greatest probability is traced through um, developments of a particular subject, and then that can be described as the most common case and why it is the most common case. What are the factors that lead to something happening? So that's interesting. An interesting and important example that's given here is about how I mean, in India specifically, but mostly all over the world, the line of descent and inheritance is patrilineal in nature. That means that the son inherits, and therefore, women usually do not have as much financial capital as men do. As a response to this, what the government did after the Kargil war is that they said that all financial compensation for the deceased warriors will, for the deceased soldiers, will go to their widows. And this, in fact, you'd imagine this would empower the women in question. But what it led to was forced marriages between widows and their brother-in-laws, so that this capital, which is supposed to have, which is perceived to have belonged to the dead soldier, does not go to the widow, but in fact is retained within the family because the line of descent overwhelms the importance of the widow. So yes, these kinds of this is a meaningful connection which is based in ordinary realities, and which which synthesized in a particular way such that uh, a certain event occurred, but someone who's studying these connections and is aware of the actualities and the intensity of emotions and norms that exist could have probably uh, had more insight into the matter than simply thinking that a public policy of giving money to women is going to fix the issue of embedded systems of deeply entrenched values and beliefs. So, yes, sociology was greatly influenced by the developments of modern science, natural science, and enlightenment, reason, individualism. And all of this led to the tradition of scientific investigation within sociology, and that manifested in a way that um, that meaningful connections could be drawn based on the study of actuality.